While it may seem like developers Capcom are going through somewhat of a renaissance period right now, the truth is, they've long been one of the most popular and highly respected companies in the world of video games. As the minds behind some of the biggest game franchises to have ever exist, they've certainly made their mark on the industry, and after years of speculation, Capcom themselves have finally released sales data regarding their top games, and it should come as no surprise that some of these have turned out to be absolute blockbusters. Still, while there are definitely a few titles which were expected to perform well from a commercial standpoint, not every entry that made the list is all that obvious. The good news is, the sales reports indicate that Capcom is going to continue being a powerhouse in the industry for many years to come. So with all that being said, it's time to take a closer look at Capcom's best-selling games to understand what exactly has made them each so popular among players.
While many longtime Resident Evil fans were skeptical whether Capcom could replicate what made the original Resident Evil 4 so special in a brand new remake, thankfully the developer managed to knock it out of the park. While the story has largely remained the same outside of a few character changes, the gameplay received a drastic upgrade. Not only are the Ganada enemies a lot smarter and more dangerous this time around, but Leon is able to perform plenty of new melee and knife attacks to help it make the game feel different and unique from its inspiration. Considering Resident Evil 4 is one of the most highly acclaimed games of all time, it only makes sense that the remake would end up selling this well, but being on the verge of 10 million is truly impressive for a game that has been out in the wild for barely 2 years. The Resident Evil 4 remake truly deserves all the credit it gets, and the sales numbers indicate that Capcom will be eager to develop more remakes of this classic franchise in the future for fans to enjoy.
It's absolutely mind-boggling that a game can sell more than 10 million units only a handful of months after its release, but it just goes to show how immensely popular the Monster Hunter franchise has become over the last few years. Jumping off the back of the extremely successful Monster Hunter world, Capcom went all out with the marketing to get people excited about the next entry in the series, which would improve on many of the aspects and mechanics that had already made World so much fun to play. Not only is the map much bigger than the previous game, but the graphics also received a notable upgrade, along with the new batch of monsters all being extremely fun to take on in battle. Monster Hunter Wilds is officially Capcom's fastest-selling game ever, proving the series still stands as their primary breadwinner in the modern age.
With Resident Evil 7 breathing new life into the survival horror franchise, fans were eager to see what Capcom would cook up for the next entry. And to say they subverted expectations would be putting it mildly. Village takes on a much different aesthetic and style from any other Resident Evil game, being much more based in the world of fantasy, and featuring enemies such as werewolves and vampires that players must take on along their grueling adventure. With over 10 million units sold, Resident Evil Village was a massive success for Capcom, and there are a few reasons that can be attributed to this. On the one hand, Resident Evil 7 did a lot to bring not only longtime fans back to this series, but also plenty of newcomers too, so it's no surprise that many of these players also decided to dive into Village. Not only that, but Village also had an excellent marketing campaign, with characters like Gris and the much-beloved Dimitrescu doing a great job of getting players invested just from the trailers alone.
Staying on the topic of Resident Evil, the next best-selling game for Capcom is the 7th entry in the series, clocking in at just shy of 15 million units. While Resident Evil 7 on its own is an excellent game thanks to its eerie setting, the immersive first-person view, and the memorable cast of new villains, the main reason it enjoyed such popularity is because of how it managed to bring the series out of its dark period. It's important to remember that the game that came before this was Resident Evil 6, which was largely disliked by many of the fans, who believed Capcom was straying too far into the action genre. Therefore, when the Resident Evil 7 was revealed as part of the kitchen demo, which took a much slower and more methodical approach to its gameplay, fans around the world were ecstatic to see a series return to its former glory, with what is now considered one of the best games in the series.
Though Iceborne is technically an expansion to the base Monster Hunter world, Capcom has classed it as its own game, which does sort of make sense, considering how gigantic this additional story really is. With the brand new Arctic Hoarfrost Reach region to explore alongside a healthy mix of new and returning monsters to duke it out with, Monster Hunter World Iceborne provides fans with tons of content to enjoy in case they ever felt like they had their fill of fighting beasts in the main game. What makes this sales figure so interesting is that it gives a clear indication as to how many people were still playing Monster Hunter World this long after release. An expansion selling over 15 million units is more or less unheard of, so the fact that so many people paid the price of a standalone game just to get even more enjoyment out of World demonstrates how insanely successful that original game was for Capcom, with the expansion becoming a smash hit in terms of sales.
Considering how well Capcom managed to pull off a remake of the first Resident Evil game, fans had been clamoring for a reimagining of the second mainline entry ever since it was first released back in 1997. This, however, wouldn't end up becoming a reality until 2019, though despite the long wait, the sales data shows that fans were still more than happy to dive back into the RPD as part of this hotly anticipated remake. Thanks to the new RE engine, the game looks downright jaw-dropping from a visual perspective, with the RPD and Raccoon City as a whole looking eerily realistic and believable. This also applies to the zombies, who, for the first time in many years, actually feel threatening and terrifying due to their unpredictability. The impressive legacy of the original Resident Evil 2, paired with the excellent marketing and word of mouth of the remake, allowed this game to fly off the shelves the moment it was released, making Capcom realize that the idea of remaking classic entries was something that fans desperately wanted.
With Capcom perfecting the monster hunting gameplay loop back in Monster Hunter World, they decided it was time to finally provide a game in the series that could be played on a handheld specifically for the Nintendo Switch. This was certainly an ambitious goal considering that the maps in Monster Hunter games had only been getting bigger over time, but by toning down the graphics and incorporating a very vibrant and beautiful art style, they managed to create a game which not only ran well on the Switch, but is also a ton of fun to play. Thanks to the addition of wire bugs, players are able to zip around the map in barely any time at all, allowing them to utilize the high ground much more effectively when taking on a ferocious monster. Speaking of monsters, there are over 70 creatures that players can take on in the base game, along with a bunch more being added in the Sunbreak expansion. The game would become so successful for the Switch that it would end up being ported onto other systems only 2 years after release, after being what many consider one of the best entry points for newcomers to the series.
While most people may associate Capcom with franchises like Resident Evil or Street Fighter due to their history, Monster Hunter World ensured that this series was also just as, if not more popular than these Capcom classics. Selling over 20 million copies in only a handful of years, Monster Hunter World was truly a phenomenon, and a big reason why it was able to catch the attention of so many people was because of Capcom's focus on making the gameplay as accessible as possible to Western markets. While the series had always enjoyed growing levels of popularity in Japan, by streamlining the gameplay and developing the game with a modern audience in mind, Capcom brought in new players who probably never would have even dreamed of playing the franchise in the first place. From the intelligent monster AI to the diverse, wide-open environments that are fully explorable, all the way to the addictive resource and weapon grind. There's a lot to love about Monster Hunter World, which is why so many people continue playing it to this day, even after newer entries have been released.